I am here with the bravery to tell you about the most forbidden, confusing, and secretive night of my life, something I never thought I would say. That fateful day when the world shifted. I assumed it would simply be about ensuring that I wouldn't be alone on my 64th birthday, but Edward had other reasons for wanting to keep me company. Nothing we did over the years could ever completely stifle the attraction between us, those forbidden emotions, and everything else we'd repressed. All of it culminated on that particular day. I will start at the beginning and tell you everything. Edward was the son-in-law of Jonathan. At 28 years old, he exudes self-assurance, drives, and the kind of charisma that could captivate me at first sight. Jonathan used to drop by frequently in the year before he died away, and he would occasionally spend days at my house. On the other hand, he went silently 2 years ago. Even though he was away, I couldn't shake the memories of the times we spent together. Unfortunately, no matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't shake the memories of him. That day eventually arrived. He showed up at my doorstep. I could tell he wasn't here solely to search the garage for some paperwork, even though he claimed he needed to do so. The intensity of Edward's stare remained unchanged from our previous encounter. It evoked all the painful feelings I had repressed. I was completely unprepared. I sensed there was more going on with this visit when he grinned at me while clutching some paperwork. Yes, I was correct. I found my beloved record playing on the gramophone he had stashed in the garage, the one I had coveted since Jonathan's life. The paperwork was really a pretext. Everything revolved around me. My chest felt like it was going to explode the second I laid eyes on that phonograph. Edward departed later without making many remarks. However, he returned later that night bearing a cake. A more profound meaning has been imbued into that once familiar smile. His reason for saying this was that he didn't want Bella to be alone on her 64th birthday. It was at that moment that I understood there was a lot larger purpose to this than just a birthday bash. I had no idea the night Edward was going to give me would be so unforgettable. Everything shifted that night. Okay, I'll fill you in on every single detail now. I was unprepared for what I witnessed when I opened the door and saw Edward standing there. This wasn't your average drop-in. Immediately I could sense it. In addition to wearing a sharp suit, he was cradling a fragile cake. He had a new, deeper, and more intense grin on his face. At 28 years old, Edward possessed an irresistible charisma that was equal parts youthful vigor and maturity. His voice was so inviting that it filled the whole entryway as he wished Bella a happy birthday. I felt an unexplainable flutter in my chest as his comments startled me. For the first time ever, someone had come to celebrate my birthday with such care, and he had remembered it. I didn't want you to celebrate your 64th birthday alone, he continued, his charming smile widening. Expect something extraordinary to happen tonight. Join my channel, subscribe, and enable notifications to hear more confessions like this if this tale speaks to you. I guarantee you, this is going to be the most exciting story you've ever heard. There was something I wanted to say, but I choked on the words. After setting the cake down on the coffee table, Edward moved closer to me. However, he spoke to me as Bella, his gaze moving delicately over me. An even more memorable evening is possible tonight. Let's make sure you get the celebration you deserve. Get dolled up and let's make this the night everyone talks about. I was going to decline at first, but his soft yet persistent stare stopped me in my tracks. I gave a small nod and made my way upstairs. Unusual exhilaration surged through me as I made my way up the stairs. I spotted a black garment that had been languishing in my closet for years the moment I opened it. As I stepped over to the mirror, I ran my fingertips over the fabric. I stripped down to my underwear and stood naked in front of my mirror before putting on the dress. My skin retained its elasticity and youthful glow. Leaning forward ever so slightly, I examined my shoulders while my fingertips traced my waist. I'm genuinely mesmerizing, I whispered to myself. Even though I was 64 years old, time appeared to have stood still for some reason. I felt very special when I put on the outfit, and I couldn't help but smile to myself. I heard a well-known tune drifting down from the living room as I made my way down the stairs. My heart belonged to that song. My pulse rate increased and my gait became clumsier. What gave Edward the idea? I didn't tell him about it at all. I headed toward the living room, my mind a mix of confusion and curiosity. Edward had meticulously selected the record to play and had the phonograph positioned in the room's center. His expression changed at the sight of me. He said nothing, but the look of awe and respect on his face spoke a great deal. Just how did you figure it out? Unable to conceal my astonishment, I inquired. With an unfaltering expression, Edward grinned gently. I heard you, Bella, he declared. You may have felt like you were the only one who ever listened to me, but I was actually the one who was doing the listening. I recalled every single detail you shared and every single one of your passions. I was comforted by his words. I hadn't felt seen or heard in a very long time. Edward came over to me and reached out to shake my hand. Bella, I want tonight to be dedicated to you. Let me do everything I can to elevate your mood. I couldn't help but notice the intensity and resolve reflected in his eyes as the song resounded throughout the room. This was no ordinary conversation. We sat down and began conversing. There were traces of all the things we had repressed for a long time in it. As time went on, the attraction between us intensified. Deep and emotionally charged, Edward's voice pierced the air. Bella, do you understand why I was absent earlier? I was taken aback by his inquiry, and tried to read his mind by fixing my sight on his emerald eyes. He seemed to carefully choose his words as he hesitated for a moment. Last but not least, he confessed, his voice kind yet commanding, that he had always been attracted to you. It was obvious to me that you were filled with enthusiasm, emotion, and desire. Because of that, I never missed it. But what I sensed was terrifying, Bella. Being in your company was more than I could handle. I wanted to run to you so badly, but my brain kept telling me it was a bad idea. His remarks brought a mix of comfort and bewilderment to me. Even though my heart was racing, I knew I had to remain calm. Looking at him, I steadied my breath. Edward, you shouldn't say this, I said, my voice quivering with emotion. He lowered his head slightly and murmured, I know I shouldn't. However, his intense stare held me motionless as he lifted them to meet mine once more. However, Bella, I can no longer suppress my emotions. I have been consumed by thoughts of you for the past 2 years. Everything about you, your smile, your eyes has stayed with me. You were always in my path. Forget it, my heart would not allow it. The sincerity of his admission shocked and thrilled me equally. I felt a shaking in the palms of my hands as I clasped them in my lap. Edward, this isn't right, I said, even though I knew there was something special about him that I couldn't ignore. That's wrong. Edward sat down on his seat and leaned in closer, leaning toward me. An intense resolve shone in his eyes. Right or wrong, he declared with a low but determined voice. Just like you, Bella, I can't deny how I feel. Looking into your eyes reveals all. You are aware that the bond we share is genuine. He had a point and I remained mute for a while. There was an undeniable connection between us, one that I had repressed for a long time and refused to face the sensations that had been building up, but which had recently intensified. Everything he said and looked at me reverberated. Finally, my voice quivered with emotion. I expressed my gratitude for your presence that day. Edward, this is a really risky situation. No matter how far we go, there will be no turning back. As he cautiously extended his hand, Edward interlaced his fingers with mine. Upon touching him, every rational barrier I had constructed crumbled. According to him, Bella, I don't want to go back. I only desire to share this moment with you, express my emotions, and express how much you mean to me. Even though I was overcome with emotion, I managed to keep my composure and keep crying. They liberated an innate part of themselves. In speaking those words, he confessed an emotion he had repressed for far too long. He went on to say, when I look at you, I see strength, passion, and a joy for life. In a voice that was both gentle and powerful. No matter how old you feel, I will always think of you as the most attractive and youthful lady I've ever met. Even my last wall of resistance was shattered by his remarks. Looking at him, I inhaled deeply. My voice quivered as I whispered to Edward, but I leaned in his direction nevertheless. What you see in me is undeniable. It's an emotion I haven't experienced in a long time. The subsequent hush was profound, yet it conveyed every detail. In that instant of silence, every hidden truth was exposed as we locked eyes. Our forbidden attraction had become stronger and more permanent. Every emotion I had repressed surfaced the moment Edward's lips contacted mine. The intensity of his passionate kiss both frightened me and brought to the surface emotions I had buried for a long time. Even now, my rational self was battling to convince me not to give in. I took a deep breath and quickly withdrew. My voice quivered as I murmured to Edward. Words failed me because I couldn't decide what to say. I felt my composure crumble as I was absorbed in his stare. I wanted to put some distance between us, and my pulse was racing as I took a step back. I ran screaming to my bedroom. I turned to face the mirror as soon as I shut the door behind me. A mix of eagerness and perplexion filled my gaze as my cheeks turned red. Even now I could feel a little tremor in my hands. Am I even doing this? A voice, motivated by an insurmountable yearning, remained unquenchable even as I mumbled to myself. My gaze lingered on my still firm, young body while I studied the fine wrinkles and signs of aging on my face in the reflection. In a low, troubled voice I whispered, "I still have it." A tiny smile spread across my lips. Still, for some reason, that insight simply served to further muddy the waters. At that very moment, I detected the little squeak of the door. As Edward stepped inside, I turned back to see his determined glare. As he closed the door behind him and drew nearer, he kept staring at me. "Bella," he declared with a low but determined voice. "Run away from me, you can't." I locked eyes with him, unable to utter a word. When Edward finally got close enough, his lips were back on mine. All of a sudden, this kiss drew me further into a situation over which I had no say. Gradually, my barriers were dissolving. Finally, I broke down and did it. I stretched out to touch his shoulders out of pure instinct. Edward drew me closer as he squeezed his arms around my waist. I felt his warmth all over me, and my heart rate increased. His kisses traveled down my neck and shoulders once they left my lips. Every time he touched me, my body eagerly responded. But this forbidden longing was so strong that it engulfed me. I took a little backward step, not to flee but to collect my breath. I carefully removed the dress straps off my shoulders. I heard the fabric drop to the floor and see it gather around my feet. Taking a quick look at myself in the mirror gave me the confidence boost I needed. "Edward," I spoke in a barely discernible whisper. "Yes, I am giving in to you." His eyes gleamed with an intensity that was hard to miss after hearing those words. With swift, almost eager motions, Edward started unbuttoning his shirt. My heart was already racing as he casually dropped it, exposing his powerful muscular physique. I felt a strong pull toward him as I watched him approach. Gently pulling me toward the bed, Edward once again put his hands on my waist. His presence enveloped me as I lay down, and he never left my side. His kisses began at the nape of my neck, worked their way down to my shoulders, and then trailed off, caressing every inch of my body. He had a way of reawakening dormant desires and feelings in me with each contact. I realized at that very second that my life would never be the same, and that this was the first instant of a night I had never imagined. My chest felt like it was going to explode from all the rapid action. My intense longing and perplexion were plainly visible when I met Edward's gaze. I said, my breath coming out of my nose, that this was beyond my wildest ideas. However, I desire this over all else at the moment. I am brimming with enthusiasm and longing. In a subtle but resolute smile, Edward cocked his head ever so slightly. His voice was soothing and mesmerizing as he introduced himself as Bella. "Tonight we are not going anywhere. We have always wanted this, but we have always run away from it." Right then, Edward's comments broke down every single barrier I had built up. I had lost interest in the outcome of this evening. I was about to really immerse myself in the experience. I closed my eyes and clutched the sheet and the edge of the bedside table with both hands because an overwhelming force poured through me. I attempted to hold my breath and concentrate solely on my feelings for 2 or 3 minutes because it was so intense. As I blinked open my eyes and fixed my gaze on the ceiling, I noticed Edward leaned over me. He had unkempt hair and a slight sheen of perspiration on his forehead. This is exactly what I was hoping for. On the bed, Edward extended his hand and placed it over mine. It was as if I were in a dream. That was both weird and vivid. I could no longer contain myself after looking in the mirror and seeing us both in that condition. There was an immense paralyzing tension in my legs. I thought I might pass out. I was taken aback by my own reactions to this intense desire and intensity that I had never felt before. Then there was Edward. He was so amazing I had a hard time believing he was genuine. His face was red with emotion as he profusely praised me. Edward, you're amazing. I muttered it with a quiver in my voice. I really do not want this evening to come to a close. His already palpable enthusiasm was only going to intensify. I felt his heartbeat as I extended my second hand and placed it on top of his chest. I confessed, my own disbelief evident, that I've always desired you. This is really happening? I don't believe it. Giving in to the comforting heat, I closed my eyes once more. My entire body was consumed by a searing heat at that precise moment. Edward slumped down next to me, his breathing irregular. With a resolute look on his face, Edward stood up and went to grab his phone. He whirled around to face me and used his fingers to unlock the screen. "Bella, I have something I'd like to show you," he announced. I went from narrow to wide-eyed the second he shifted the phone to face me. The image depicted a cottage situated along a lake. A quiet, quaint, and intimate spot. That was the ideal setting I had always imagined. "I want to take you here," he stated with a serious and eager voice. "We are alone in this place, far from anyone else. We will visit this location tomorrow morning. Plus, I'll suggest an outfit I've picked out just for you when we get there. I finally met my ideal woman tonight. Bella, you are that woman. You've been the one." My heart was racing as his words whipped me into a frenzy. Words failed me when I met his gaze. This wasn't an evening tale. Something far more was about to unfold via this portal. Even though I had no idea what was beyond that door, I felt a newfound sense of security knowing that I wasn't doing it alone. This is just the beginning. There will be more. If you're still reading, I can tell this story has moved you. Don't miss a thing since there's a lot more to tell. Please consider following this story, enabling notifications, and leaving a comment. Please share your opinions in the comments section. I am eager to read them. I am incredibly grateful for your support.